Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa. There's about 200 million people here, and more than half of those are under the age of 30. But with an election dominated by ageing candidates, just how are the youth in this country making sure their voices are heard? These young people took to the streets in Abuja as part of the Vote Not Fight campaign to try and end youth involvement either as perpetrators or victims of electoral violence.
Youths are always the tools being used by politicians to cause violence during elections. But I would like to tell my fellow young people out there that election will be war, and they should participate peacefully in elections, and that they should know that all those politicians who would call them to participate in violence or perform violence during elections, that they've dropped their kids abroad, and their kids are not actually part of this. Their kids will not be used for violence, so they should not allow themselves to fall victim to politicians.
Hundreds of people took part in the peace walk through the country's capital.
Why have you joined this walk today?
I've joined this walk because, first of all, it's my civic responsibility to be part of ensuring that this 2019 election goes fair and is really credible. And as a citizen of Nigeria, I believe in the mantra that you have to be and create the change you want to see in your nation. So being a part of this work is my own voice and me volunteering to say, you know what, time has come for us to come as a nation to create that change that we really deserve in Nigeria. And protect your vote. Vote, not fight. You must vote, you must not fight. You can do that, whoever you want to vote for is fine, but let's do that in love, in unity, and most importantly, promote Nigeria, promote unity in diversity. That's why I'm here today.
But violence is far from the only issue facing Nigeria's youth. Unemployment, education, health all need to be addressed. And not everybody is willing to wait for the established candidates to do something about it.
Young candidates in Nigeria have joined together in a bid to fight against the status quo of the country's two main parties. They've created a platform called WeDon'tTire.com, and essentially this is a website which allows people to see which young candidates are running in their area. So for instance, if we look at Delta, we can see which candidates are aged between 18 and 35, what position they're running for, and even which party they're a member of. Now the idea is to simplify things so that people can see who's around in their region and vote for a candidate they might not normally choose.
I went to meet one of the people on that list, the youngest presidential candidate, Chike Ukebu.
My candidacy was pillared on three things: education, technology, and entrepreneurship. Now, for the next administration, regardless of who it is, education should be priority. And I'll tell you why. Education helps us to identify problems, to understand them, and to find solutions to them. And every other sector, in my opinion, should be built on that, right? So we cannot solve, the healthcare problems if we don't have teaching hospitals that can train qualified, healthcare providers. We cannot solve, the agricultural sector if people don't understand the importance of industrialized farming and how to leverage on all of the new technologies that can amplify solutions in that sector. So for every single sector, you see how education becomes extremely crucial. The next one will be power. 40%, so small businesses in Nigeria today spend at least 40% of their operational capital generating power. We live in a nation where 55% of the population don't have access to power. Yet, Nigeria is still the largest economy in Africa. Imagine what happens if we can fix the power problems, right? There are so many sectors that will spring up like that just because of how resilient and how innovative and industrious the everyday Nigerian is.
Chike is young, educated and full of ideas that could no doubt improve Nigeria. But one of the things standing in the way of candidates like him is the godfather system. This is where wealthy older men, sometimes former office holders, essentially sponsor a candidate in an election to ensure they win the seat. The biggest issue with that is that when the candidate takes office, they tend to work for the benefit of the godfather, not the electorate. But things are changing. The NGO One has launched a Vote Your Future campaign to encourage young Nigerians to think about who can best address issues the country is facing.
Good governance by its nature needs to be decentralized. Everybody needs to own a piece of it. So every time we see a situation where one person or a group of people are determining the lot of a lot of people, and not in a beneficial way, we know there's work to be done. If we look into this 2019 cycle, you're seeing it in little ways. There are a few new candidates that have come up, both new parties and new entrants into the whole democratic landscape that are doing something positive, changing the people's minds on what is possible. So godfatherism is not the only way, there are other ways. And much like change, it happens gradually.
How do you get into people's head that actually the power of your vote is more valuable to you than, say, a few thousand naira that you're being offered right now? Because when people are struggling, that can seem really tempting.
I feel like you have to segment the audience. If we're telling those who are struggling every day not to take money, I feel like it's a fallacy of conversation. Because the issue is, if poverty exists, people anywhere in the world will do what is expedient and enables their family today, as opposed to what's, delaying that for the future, because that future is not guaranteed. But for those of us who don't have to do that, for those of us who can speak, when our elected leaders become presidents, governors, legislative members, the issue of poverty needs to be addressed. The failure of leadership is that people sell their votes. Every time a politician goes and says, here's 4,000, here's 5,000, here's a bag of salt, take it in lieu of, instead of, and because of this, give me a vote. You look that politician in the face and know they've failed because you are in a position where that is appealing to you.
There is definitely a change in the atmosphere in Nigeria. People no longer seem happy to settle for the way things have always been done. There's young innovators, entrepreneurs, educators, determined to improve lives for everyone in this country. There may not be a transformation in this election, but those in power shouldn't rest comfortably. Nigeria's youth simply isn't willing to sit back and be fed scraps anymore. They're demanding a seat at the table. Faith Orr, Arise News.